All right, everyone, welcome to class. This week we're going to talk about web server backups, backup policies, and so forth. What type of backup policy you should use, when you should use them. I'm going to go over the data integrity lab as well. Keep in mind, you have a walkthrough at the end of each data integrity, each lab that we do, so my recap might not really be necessary. I'm still deciding whether I'm going to keep going over them after the fact. I want to make sure I get your questions answered, but you do already have these videos for the most part. There's one where we don't, the man in the middle detection. And there's a reason for that, and I'll discuss when we get to that point. But for the most part, it's kind of redundant for going through these things, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time on some of the actual content stuff that's not the lab as well, not the labs themselves, such as, backup policies. Riveting stuff, I can assure you. All right, I'm going to be honest with you. Backup policies and backing up systems are not the most enjoyable things all the time, but they are something you should be aware of. I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. You may hear some background noise as I'm doing this recording. I've got a few little ones here today who may be running around in the background, so just heads up, you might hear some sudden singing of songs or throwing of temper tantrums. Anyway, with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So something that impacts everything that you guys are going to do on a regular basis is your your server backups. Server backups are important for a lot of different reasons. One, because they're used as baselines of your servers, a point at which there was functionality. And if you ever have to go back and reference what that point looks like, say you've had an attack and there's something you need to go back and push out, these are huge for things like ransomware attacks, for example. Making sure that you have a good, clean server backup that's maintained on a regular basis is important, and not just with servers on that topic. Making sure that your end units have good backups as well is important, and you can imagine this isn't just good and effective policy for companies, but also for big organizations as well. Because if you have an attack and everything's compromised, let's think back, right? Whenever you have something that really jacks up your computer, what's the first thing you always want to kind of look for? It's to see if you've got that restore point, right? So you can just go back and you're like, you know what, I just want to go back to the way things were when things were better. Very similar mentality here. So let's go through these slides. So in the lab and the course, we'll discuss the importance of backups and having them and why they're so important. And you're actually going to implement a backup as well and move a backup from point A to point B. All right, so complete system backups are always a good idea. However, it can be a time-consuming and data storage-consuming practice. Now, that's where this kind of gets a little bit of the pragmatic reality gets into it. This is very similar to patch management and patch appliance in that it's kind of like one of those things as a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. No one wants to do this. This is not the fun, cool, sexy thing to do in cybersecurity. Maintaining backups. Ooh, yeah, so cool, right? You're not going to be taking down terrorist groups with by making a backup of your system. Now, I'm sure someone out there will make an argument, well, you don't know, if you think a terrorist has attacked your system and you're able to use the backup and do comparative analysis, you may be able to take them. Okay, yeah, you got me. Good job. But people aren't thinking of that when they're thinking of, doing the fun TV stuff, cybersecurity things that, you all see on TV, and it's pretty inaccurate on top of it, just as a side note. Not that anybody asks, but a lot of that is made up or just misleading completely. Depending on your server setup, it may be more efficient to only back up certain files. So if you have a huge, super gigantic system that you need to make sure is backed up on a regular basis, say you got a nightly thing you need to do, maybe you do a big one once a week that kind of takes a backup of everything. But throughout the week, each night, you do just a backup of key systems, key files that change on a regular basis, and so forth. If the only thing on a company's internal web server is the web page, backing up the web server's contents on a regular basis can save time. So what I mean by that is, as many of you know, there are systems that are dual use. I do not recommend necessarily ensuring that your web server is also a key server for internal documents, because keep in mind that web server lives in the DMZ and is kind of positioning itself as an open target for attackers. However, some people do it nonetheless. So from that mentality, if you actually do implement things in the right fashion, maybe on a regular basis, you just want to back up the web server content on that server because it helps save time and it won't impact business operations. Now, web servers, there are many, many, many different web servers available for use personally and commercially. Everything from Apache, Nginx, Microsoft as well has IIS. Apache is the one you're going to see the most of, at least, let me rephrase, it's the one that I see the most of. It's open source and cross-platform, which makes it very available. Very easy, not easy to use, but very much the kind of the default option because it costs the least amount of money. Regardless of which web server you or your company uses, knowing the basic configuration and content layouts are important to restoring in case of an incident. So this is kind of a bigger kind of recommendation. Always ensure that you have that you know what you're putting up online, that you know your systems well enough that if something goes wrong, you know what that might look like. Apache is arguably the most used web server software in the world, right? It's versatile, configurable, and free. Same could be said about Linux, right? And a lot of people don't like to think about it, but let's remember that you have kind of a Linux fork if you want to, even in your iPhone and Android, right? And all of the IoT, most of IoT is Linux. Microsoft really only comes into play for the most part. All right, there's always exceptions when you're talking about end user terminals and controls. Combination of these two, Linux and as the OS and Apache as the web server, is a very common setup. And as a result, since it's a very common setup, it can be one of the main targets for any types of attacks. The location of web content in Linux is at the var/www folder in your file structure. So that's where you're going to keep all the web content there. And the location of Apache configurations in Linux is in the etc Apache 2 folder. If you are not familiar with Linux subsystems and the file structure, it doesn't take long to get familiar with them. I recommend you take 10 to 15 minutes, go online, and at least get a passing familiarity with them. For the most part, this and maybe one or two other elements are the parts you're going to need to know for this course. I don't belabor it because I make sure you know the parts that you need to know for this course. For example, where the desktop is. You guys have learned where the desktop is in those labs. But yeah, do yourself a favor and just get at least a little familiar with that, with the Linux subsystem. Content management systems, CMSs, they're great. I love them because they make it a lot easier to make a web page. However, they can be dangerous, right? Because you have these things such as WordPress I've got right here. And not everyone updates their WordPress on a regular basis. Here's the thing, the catch-22 about CMSs, right? A CMS is providing the capability to do something technical to someone who isn't inherently technical. What do I mean by that? It's making the creation of a web page a lot easier. So you don't have to be a programmer to make a web page and so forth, meaning more people can do it. But the other side of the coin there is you now have not as technical people putting things up online, maybe not thinking of security, right? As a result, they are often a target for attacks. When people see WordPress online, when nefarious people see WordPress online, that can then become something that makes them more of a target, makes the individual more of a target because WordPress is not always updated. The individual doesn't always take it upon themselves to update WordPress. All right, there's a lot of commands that are going to be used in this lab, and I want to take a little bit of time to go over them because they're important commands that you should know. One is SSH. SSH is used to remote into a system to find data to backup. So not just find data to backup. If you are in a Linux terminal, and now with Windows you can do it too if you've enabled those Linux commands, you can use SSH to create a secure remote connection to another computer. Nano is a basic text editing tool. I think I've used it in a few examples so far, but it's one where you can do text editing within the command line. Other people prefer to use Vi or something along those lines. That's cool. In this instance, I'm just showing you Nano because it's my preference. Tar is used to create a backup of a directory into a single file for easy transfer, similar to zipping things. So when you hear individuals talk about tarballs, it's kind of similar to zipped files, big compressed file of many files. MD5 sum, we've discussed, MD5 hashes previously. These are used to create a hash of the backup file for data integrity purposes. So we do this to make sure things weren't corrupted or changed in transit. And then SCP is used to securely copy backup files from one location to another. So it uses SS20, the same protocol as SSH to move files from one location to the other. It's still very commonly used. Even Google uses it. All right, so keep all of this in mind when you're going through the lab this week. I'm going to pull up last week's lab, and we're going to walk through that, and then we'll go from there. All right, so last week we talked about data in motion and data at rest. Ensuring that data is not corrupted when it is transitioning from one location to another is really important, and that's kind of what we're doing in this instance. So let's go ahead and get started with this lab. First, we need to log in. All right, now we're going to go ahead and open up the terminal. As you can see in the instructions here, right, you've saved the file in your home folder on your Kali box, right here, your local Kali box. Typing in the command ls, this is an important command for Linux, an important command for understanding where you are in a file system. Will list, right, what files are in your home directory. What we want to do is we want to create an MD5 hash, right, of the file that we're going to be working with, so we can do it for comparative purposes. So create a file with the MD5 hash of this file using the following command here: md5 sum it web backup.tar. And that makes that tarball, that takes that tarball, which I just explained is that zipped file, compressed file of files, and we're going to make a MD5 backup of it. MD5 sum, sorry. Shouldn't talk while I'm trying to type. All right, as you can see here, using cat, we can take a look at the actual contents of that. So what cat does is shows you what's in there. And there's our hash right there. You can see it. This is what we're going to be comparing to later. All right? Now, here we go. Let's go on over and compare the actual, in this instance, not the one we just made, but one of the, quote, original web backup to what we have here. So to check this out, we're going to go ahead and do an MD5 sum of what we have here is the original web backup.tar, right? Right, there we go. There we have it. And then we're going to compare that to original, and oh, here we go, sorry. We're going to take the cat. There we go. We've got it right there. What we see here is that when we actually did our backup, we can see, hey, that looks good. It looks very similar, right, to the cat-ing of it as well. Now, at a glance, these all look legit, but let's do MD5 sum to compare. So we'll do that by typing MD5 sum. There we go. And it says, hey, okay, meaning everything's good. That's it. That's what you're going to get. All right. Now we know that the file we have matches the original backup. We want to see if the IT backup, right, matches the original MD5 hash. I'm going to have a kind of guess there for, it's going to be a big no based on I can see this up here, right? we're going to use a tool called vmdiff. What it's going to do is highlight all the original characters that aren't the same. So it's going to give us a quick way of identifying if things don't line up. So vmdiff vimdiff original.md5 and our IT, the one we literally just made. Ooh, yikes. Not looking good, right? Pretty bad. That's a bad, surprising discovery. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have to close this out and notify the authorities, right? Now, this may seem a little out of place, but in your next lab, you're going to see kind of like how you can pull down the backup and get it right this whole time. All right, then go ahead and submit your work. This should have been an easy one for all of you, an easy A, that is. And we'll initiate our grading. Sorry, that's my daughter crying in the background. She's not feeling so good. All right, you can see the 100%. Now this is cool, but let's see how this actually applies to the cybersecurity field and what work roles this applies to. All right, so you guys can see right here, here's the data integrity lab that we just did. This develops a bunch of different skills for the work roles of cyber operator, cyber defense forensic analyst, cyber crime investigator, and vulnerability assessment analyst and system security analyst. Again, if you go to NIST 800-181, these are work roles as defined by the U.S. government that are applicable to the field of cybersecurity. And when I break open this breakdown, I can see that we did a lot of different things. So when we ran MD5Sum on the backup file, there are several KPIs as this applies to. You now have a level of skill, a measurable level of skill in verifying the integrity of files, right? Then, when we confirmed the contents of it, you performed hash comparisons against an established database, something that's established there. Remember, we already had one that was set up for us, and we compared it to the one we had just made. Then, displayed new MD5 hash of the original backup, skill and one-way hash functions, which we did with MD5. Look at all these skills you guys have, and don't worry, you're going to get more of them as we go along. So you can go ahead and compare these here. Now, why are these important? Well, let me pull up 800-181 and show you. Here you can see the cyber operator right here. This is an individual who conducts collection, processing, and or geolocation of systems to exploit, locate, and or track targets of interest. They perform network navigation, tactical forensic analysis, and when directed, executes on net's operations. That's pretty cool, right? And you have to know how to hash to do that. You have to make sure that data gets from one place to another safely. So say you're conducting some kind of attack operation. You want to make sure that when you're attacking a system, you're using the right tool and not something that is similar to the right tool. And hashes can do that. Or if you're moving important data from one system to your system, you want to make sure it's the same data and it's not corrupted along the way. Again, hashing can help with that. Now, looking a little deeper into all of that, and here, take a look here. As you can see, not lying, 800-181. All right, and all the different skills are listed out down here too, if you're interested in the skills that are affiliated with it. Now let me show you this real quick. Here is the work role description and all the KSAs, the tasks, the skills, the abilities that you should have when you're actually doing this kind of work. That kind of applies to this job, and you'll see that we do a lot of this in our labs, and then you can take these and correlate them to all of these. It gets a little intense. That's why I make it easier for you, right? All right, so that should be helpful there. And when we're talking about different security controls, right, as we're talking about 853 right here, there are a lot of different security controls that hashing applies to as well. For example, in the protection of audit information, right? So we have up here AU9, protection of audit information. This is just one of many, where it tells you you should use things such as hashes to protect that information. Of note, it also helps with the non-repudiation, which we discussed last week. All right, that about covers it today. Go ahead. I'm going to open up the discussion section for this course. Again, apologies for it being a little bit later than last week, but you'll still be able to discuss this lab and so forth. It's pretty straightforward. It's not the hardest lab of the bunch by far. I've gotten a few questions about the midterm and the final. Here's the deal with the midterm and the final. All right, let's look at the schedule. The midterm is on the 18th of March. I know a lot of you may be concerned. Some of you have expressed your concern. Don't be concerned about the midterm. All right? There are, as long as you do these labs and know these labs, you will be ready for the midterm. Can't stress that enough. All right? I'll take a little bit of time in the next couple classes, probably around the class of the 4th or 11th, to go through some key things to help emphasize, important stuff, but I'm very confident on how well you're all going to do on the midterm. All right, so don't worry about that. Also, group presentations, as you may have noticed, I did put up the information for what group you're in last week. Get together with your group, use the UMBC search tool to coordinate and work together. Then we're going to do a presentation, probably all together on the Blackboard, using the Blackboard presentation capability. I'll make sure that April 29th, everything's set up there, and then you guys will all present. If anyone has any questions, keep reaching out. Someone asked me if their paper could be longer than 5 pages. Sure. Now, I'm not going to keep, if someone gives me like a 20-page dissertation of cyber, let's be real, all right? I'm not going to enjoy reading it. But 5 pages is fine. A little over 5 pages is fine. I'm not going to dock you. Big thing here is don't write less than the amount of pages I assign. And really don't plagiarize. I have many tools to detect plagiarism, and it never goes well when I have to have that discussion. All right? It's super easy to not plagiarize. Super easy to write the right amount of pages. All right? I'm not looking for ways to fail people here. Give me a reason to give you a good grade, don't give me a reason to have a hard talk. All right? All right, well, that's about it. If you have any other questions, as always, you can reach out to me. Someone said they were having trouble. They were way ahead with the threat detection lab, I believe. Keep trying, keep cracking at it, and we'll go from there. And that's about it. All right, I hope everyone has a good week. I'll talk to you later.